to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can.
Good morning, another week here. Mateo, how are you?
Man, I am fantastic. I'm looking forward to this week. How are you?
I'm super good. We made it. We did it. 10 episodes. This is the 10th one.
I love it.
Every week it's growing. Last week's episode, more first week visits than any of the previous ones, and we still have 3 more days, full days, or 2 full days before our next one. So it's growing. It's doing exactly what we planned on doing. I'm super stoked about it. No bullshit. Short-term rental podcast is here to stay. The other thing I wanted to, and we never really talk about business, but if you're liking this podcast, please leave a review, share it with your friends, tell everyone about it, because we work really hard on it. And this is a side gig for Mateo and I, but it's a passion project. Again, its focus is on culture, the focus is on news, and speaking in current cultural topics. And speaking of, we have an amazing guest today. Robert Geller, founder of FabStayz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
The timing is right. And a lot of things are coming out in the news, and normally we talk about what happened in the week, and I really want to just quickly touch on that, and then we're going to go ahead and learn about Robert's story and talk about some amazing things that happened in the news this week. But one thing that kind of a expose almost that came out that I wanted to briefly touch about, Bloomberg had an article called Bloomberg Business, AIRBNB'S NIGHTMARES. And it was kind of gut wrenching. And did you get a chance to read it, Mateo?
I did.
And I know Robert and I were talking about it before you jumped in here. It wasn't necessarily, it definitely shed some a negative light on some things that are going on. And we don't want to dive too much into it today, but more want to just talk about it because it just happened. And let's come back maybe next week or the week after and have a more in-depth talk about it. But what did you briefly, what did it bring to attention to you?
Just what perspective from the outside industry with the outside in, it's a different perspective. I think we get tunnel vision in terms of our access because we live in this space, but it's a gap that we're going to have to talk to, especially because of where we're going as a country and the things that are happening in our country broadly. There's issues that happen in our industry that have happened in our industry forever, but this style of hospitality faces a different concern, right? And now where we're at with COVID and cleaning, and we're going to have some serious conversations about, as we professionalize the industry, as hosts and professionals continue to come together, what this means for us and what it means for the guest. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? We can write all these articles, we can, take everybody's opinions, but feet on the ground, what guests want and what guests need and what guests will take is the only thing that really matters at the end of the day. And whatever happens, just not to get too deep into this, we're going to have to change how we operate in a lot of ways. I just want to put it like that. And I do want to delve more deeply into this, but, again, I don't want to take away from where we're going today. I think this is an episode in and of itself, as we discussed. So I'll save my rounds for that, but
yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of interesting conversations coming out of this.
Well, let's.
Also, just I'm going to add my 2 cents, and you can when you bring this back up. But it's almost something that's indicative of the shared economy. Even outside of short-term rentals. I mean, it's something that's sadly, that comes from the shared economy, and it can, if you look at ride sharing as well. So it's definitely something as a society that we are becoming more aware of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree, and it's interesting because there's because of the shared economy, because of the short-term rental space, because of vacation rentals, and in the limelight that all of this has been, in the front and center stage that this is taken recently, and it's just getting more and more in everyone's face. More and more of this stuff is going to come out, unfortunately, as well. So it's like, how do we deal with it, and how do we pivot as an industry? And Mateo, you said it right. How do we professionalize this in a way that isn't basically burying it? How do we go ahead and actually deal with it correctly, and not just looking at it with dollar signs on our glasses and looking through that lens, but how do we deal with this appropriately? Which I think leads to today's topics. We have the founder of FabStayz, Robert Geller. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how you got, and tell us about FabStayz, why it became a thing, and let's chat about it.
Awesome, thank you. First, my pronouns are he, him, his. And FabStayz is an LGBTQ plus accommodation platform. We actually look at it more as inclusive accommodations is where we're at. And we're really fit in the space, in the short-term rental space, of a niche platform. And I'll be asked by people that, well, there's the big OTA, so why would you need to exist? And a niche platform is not something new, whether it be FemBnB for women solo travelers, or New B&B catering to Black travelers, or MuzBnB, or Bring Fido, or whatever those niches are, or At Ease for military travelers and housing. So
thank you for that shout out, by the way.
You got it. We're gonna stick together. I mean, there's a lot in the space of niche platforms. So I usually like to get that out there, because I'll sometimes be confronted with like why, how come, and why isn't there already these big platforms? And there's something to be said about niches, and that where we all of us collectively can address the needs of that particular niche. And really, if you look at the number one concern of travelers, and this is beyond LGBTQ plus, and that is safety. We're all concerned about safety, and when we're traveling, and safety takes on a different meaning, and it looks differently to different travelers. Safety is going to look different to a Black traveler. Safety is going to look different to a single female traveler, and safety looks different to an LGBTQ plus traveler. Just some examples there in the different and how it might look. And unless we're in those shoes of those individuals, how are we going to know? Right. I can speak to what I don't know. Clearly I'm a white cis gay male, and I can speak to that experience. And so that's a little bit of background on the niche piece of it. For me, I got into this as an Airbnb superhost. Mm-hmm. I think I've been hosting since 2014. Mine was, ironically enough, as our conversation started off, in the home sharing. And so for me, I had a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath condo, and my guest bedroom was my short-term rental on Airbnb. And I was confronted with, giving great hospitality. I'd like to think where my guests would check in. I would ask them, how was their traveling? How was their flight? Then get them all settled in, share with the guest some of my favorite things to do when visiting Tampa, Florida. And then inevitably, just in casual conversation, I would be asked a question, benign, totally benign. And that question would be, what do you do for a living? Doesn't sound like it's not a loaded question. Well,
right.
Just casual conversation,
Yeah, the weather, your flights,
right.
Things to do. What do you do for a living?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I owned a gay travel company. It was called Outings and Adventures. I had it for 10 years. Still, the brand is still out there. And here I am, confronted with a stranger a foot and a half away from me, standing a foot and a half away from me in my home for the next 3 nights. How do I answer that question? And this is like racing through my head. I was like, dude, give him an answer, or give the person an answer. And that's just going through my head, and I would be confronted with that every single time. And it wasn't so much that I ever had any issues with any of the guests. Even though I'm thinking to myself, is their jaw going to hit the floor? What are they going to get? Am I going to get a deer in the headlights kind of look? Am I going to be uncomfortable in my own home for the next 3 nights? All of that, I'm getting all worked up. I'm getting all worked up, in that space. And so sometimes I wouldn't say anything. Other times I would be my authentic self. But I realized, I was being confronted with that with every guest. And I'm like, wow, this isn't cool. This anxiety I'm getting every single time. What else is, who else is experiencing this? And it was important for me when we were creating FabStayz that our narrative was coming from a place of improving the travel experience for both the guest and the host, versus our narrative was not, thankfully it was not, I was discriminated on Airbnb, so I started this. That was not our narrative. It was more of, how can we take out this pain point that we were experiencing? And at least I was. And then from there, and you have to apologize, I get kind of excited and talk kind of fast.
Oh, no apologies needed, man. Look, this is we're talking culture. We're passionate. We know how it goes. There's no BS here, man. So be yourself.
I absolutely love that how this was started in a way to give both comfort, not only to the traveler, because usually the focus is on how do we fix, how do we go ahead and cater to the traveler, but you're catering to the host. You're how do you give that comfort level on both sides? I absolutely love that about this whole platform and why you started.
Well, thanks. And so, but from there, I'm like, well, am I the only one having this experience? So then I just started asking online, and then I looked at a thread on Twitter where someone was from the LGBTQ plus community that had a bad experience with their host. And then I saw on the thread, like, people are asking, well, why don't you have a rainbow flag on your listing? And then, and I'm looking at the thread, and I'm seeing Airbnb's answering, like, we welcome everyone. And then basically what they were saying was, well, if you don't have a rainbow flag, that means you're not welcoming. And then, so we're going to have an Asian flag, we're going to have a black flag, or where do the flags stop? So none of that was actually said, but I was just reading this between the lines. I thought to myself, well, there's an opportunity here. But then I then put together a Survey Monkey, and I started asking questions online, and then stories were being shared with me from travelers and hosts all over the world. And they were simple stories of travelers saying that they would say in their message to the host, my partner and I. And it was kind of like putting a little bait out there saying, okay, how are they going to respond to my partner and I? And then another one said to me that they'd look at the listing, trying to get any clues from the listing or from the language in the listing. Or one person told me that their profile picture had a rainbow flag behind them, so they didn't have to say anything. So just their picture said it. Or there was that host in Portland who shared with me, she had received a message from a traveler, and all it said was, I'm trans. And the person didn't want to invest any more in the conversation because they probably have been shunned in the past, and that's all the message had said. And then there was Vesna in Australia, when she shared with me that she had same-sex travelers. They said they were friends, and she's like, I know they're a couple, but I went along with the charade. And she said, I felt horrible because there's this great gay bar that my niece and I go to, and I wanted to share that with them. And I thought that I could improve their travel experience, and I couldn't provide them that information.
Right. How do you breach that topic if that olive branch isn't already put out there in the form of a platform or a niche market? It's hard.
Exactly.
Well, and I think it's important to point out why too, right? Like in the why in this space, right? Because there's a reason, right, behind this. Like, all of this is coming from something, right? Like, and to take your experience, right? Like, in the African American community, there was green books, right? because it had to be underground, right? Like it wasn't a whole lot of guessing, right? If you were going to take it, if you're African American or not, unless you were like extremely light skinned and could pass, but you didn't have those issues. But you actually, you had to have green books that were, and if you want to go back and take it like to the Underground Railroad and things like that, like there's a legacy of, but why were these even in place? Because people couldn't be who they weren't accepted for who they are, right? And let's be very clear, it was dangerous for them. And you didn't know, where you were safe and where you were not, right? So just not to take over your space, like, but to fill that out, like,
yeah,
it's a huge issue that I don't think a lot of people. I think a lot of people think this was so long ago when these things happened, and it was so long ago when we needed this, and it's really not.
Well, to your point, Mateo, actually, in our community, we have our own book, because we had our own book too.
So that's where I was going. I was going to ask, like, I didn't know if that existed.
We have a book too. Actually, we had multiple. There was one called the Damron Guide, one that was Spartacus, and it was same thing. Mm-hmm. And we knew that there was safety in that. And the interesting to this that is on the other side is I'll hear hosts say, well, I don't discriminate. I've actually, unfortunately, I've heard, I don't discriminate, take anybody's money. And that's not true. I don't think that's how Marriott got to be their side, but with that. But
right.
But I'd like to think that, if we add a little bit of context, if the host is saying, I don't discriminate, I get that, but it's not about you. It's about the LGBTQ plus experience. It's about the Black experience. Mm-hmm. It's not that you don't discriminate. It's like sadly, we're taking with us all of our baggage. All of our experience. And for us in the LGBTQ plus community, what we're looking to alleviate and take out of the equation is really what really FabStayz boils down to is we want to take away the coming out experience.
Right.
Us in the LGBTQ community, we each have our own coming out experience, whether it's to family, whether it's to friends, whether it's a new job, whether it's in travel. We relive this over and over again. And so our opportunity was to take out that coming out experience and remove that from short-term rental booking and traveling experience.
Right.
And John, we were talking before we started this episode. Something in the news.
The coming out experience.
Yeah, talking about coming out experiences. Yeah.
This hits on it. Just yesterday.
Yeah, that Carl Nassib. He's with the Raiders. He's an active player, and if you haven't watched the video, just Google Carl Nassib, Nassib, coming out. And it's a great. I think he put it on Instagram. It was a great, just a couple minute video.
All over the news.
Yeah, you can't miss it. But holy heck, wow.
Yeah. I got chills. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't finish it. I thought I was going to break down in tears. It was so heartfelt. And if you're a member of the LGBT community, that experience, because we have all done it, not on a stage like he has done, but we all have experienced it. And then even to hear him say that he's been wanting to do that for 15 years. Mm-hmm. That just hits on what we experience in the LGBT community in coming out. It's amplified, but you get to see that in a very personal level.
So, Robert, we were discussing too, just going to kind of show the ignorance that's out there, right? Even in my experience, right? When I heard the news, I was like, wait, hold up. He's not the first gay football player out there. Number one, as someone who played football through college, right? But I think it for a lot of people that are straight, not narrow like myself, or just straight period, first of all, we can't understand the gravity and the weight of what coming out means, right? From, and this is from, I've talked to my nephew about it. I've grown up differently coming from Portland in a different space. So, but I'll never be able to understand what that weight is and what that is like. And how momentous this really is. But I get bits and pieces of it because I know what the football environment is like. I know what those locker rooms can be brutal. Out on the field, in the locker room, in those communities. I get that. I get that part too. And I think that's what's so substantial about this to me is that I didn't know he was the first active player to do that. So shout out to him for that, because that's crazy. And
what's so amazing, and I apologize for cutting off, there's that
no.
impact on the LGBTQ plus youth out there,
Yeah.
thinking to themselves that, where do I fit in, or where do I mean, LGBTQ plus youth have a suicide rate twice their peers. I mean, for them to, I'm going to get choked up, but just for them to have this role model, I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean, we've had athletes come out on the Olympics after the Olympics, or there's been football players that had not, I guess, gone to the field, but maybe in the draft process had come out. I mean, to have someone on the national stage like that, and his message, it just, like, again, felt so heartfelt and genuine. It was not someone that was, okay, how can I, get out there and make some noise? It just was just spot on to happen this week during Pride Week. Like, I guess it's Pride Month, but this is like the week, and then this is the upcoming weekend. It is monumentous, yes.
And again, I think that the impact of that, right, is because, again, like the statement is the first part, right? And I don't think what people really have to understand is that it takes the courage to make the statement, because now you have now it's not in the closet anymore, it's not hidden anymore, it's not, hey, I think this, it's there, it's verified, I'm living who I am, right? And I'm committed to this. And the courage it takes to make that statement. And then the other part I don't want to get lost either is, the ability to also use his position to make it better for others too in the donation. He made $100,000 donation, right?
To the Trevor Project.
To an organization that is helping people in need in similar situations that, need that help and support. And so, like, that's the part about it too. Like, we can sensationalize it, like, hey, we're talking about first and all these other things, but the amount of courage it takes to do that, strength it takes to do that, I hope does not get lost on people just because they don't understand or can't relate, right? Like, I hope people take the time to really look at the impact that this has and understand why this is a big deal.
Well, and I'm excited the fact that there are youth out there, there are LGBTQ plus youth out there that are seeing this, and I know it is making a difference in their life in the last 24 hours just to see that. I mean, I just remember when I grew up, I didn't have that. I mean, there was no role model like that. I mean, so I'm just, that thrills me. I mean, we might not see that. Maybe we'll hear some stories, but to know that is actually impacting LGBTQ plus youth right now is pretty amazing.
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
When did I know Pride Month or Pride Week's been a thing for a while, and I don't want to call it just a thing and downplay that. That's not what I mean. But every year it gets bigger and bigger. When do you know exactly when it started?
So the 50th anniversary was last year or the year before of Stonewall. And then I think San Francisco's 50th was supposed to be last year, and then Stonewall was 2 years ago. So it's 50 plus years now. And something that I wanted to share with you that I have not told you yet, which is pretty cool, with FabStayz that aligns with Pride Week. This week, it will be in print on the newsstands on Saturday. It will be in digital this week prior to Saturday when it goes on print. But FabStayz will be appearing in the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, wow. All right.
Nice.
Right?
Congratulations. You heard it here first.
Yep.
That's awesome.
They're doing a story on inclusive accommodation platforms and to align with Pride Weekend. And so that will be in this weekend's Wall Street Journal Saturday issue.
I can't wait to read it.
Me too.
Now I'm looking forward to reading it too, but that brings up something I would love to talk about, right? Going back to the niche circle, Robert, you and I live in this world, right? In niche hosting platforms and sites. What's the lesson in this? And I think about this a lot. What's the lesson in this for the bigger platforms, right? Like what can they do, right? Like we're not going anywhere in this space. And I think our success is driven by our ability to do things authentically and to really specialize in the demographic that we focus on, right? I know they'll try, right? And not saying that they can't do better than what they're doing in this space, but I don't know, and I'd love to, kind of dig in this with you, is like, what do they do? How do they get this? Are they, again, are they gonna, is it, how do you, is it part of the larger culture of the organizations? Because you can look at the platforms and you can look at how they're set up corporately and they look great, right? And I'm pretty sure they have, a bit of diversity that focuses on, internally as an organization. But how does that translate to their customer experience, right? And can they do better, and how do they do better, and what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, interesting enough, I had presented FabStayz to a representative at Airbnb. Mm-hmm. And it was actually before we had a name, and we happened to be at a conference, and I said, hey, I want to share with you this concept. And the person was like, wow, I think this is incredible. And they also happened to be in the diversity inclusion department over at Airbnb. So it's interesting. I mean, of course, they have the dollars. They can put out an amazing Pride video, that will blow off budgets that I will never see. And they can fund projects like they did. I think they funded the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, and they did a movie. So, I mean, those are things that on a smaller platform that we're just not going to have access to. But us smaller platforms, our niche platforms, I mean, we are embedded in the communities that we serve. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are on the front line. We are that community. We are living, breathing it. We are interacting. I almost think to the point where the platform is secondary. It's the community that is the first piece. Mm-hmm. And if you look at any of these niches, that's where the strength is. It's in that immersive being. I mean, not only being in the community, but I mean, I'm experiencing it every day, and I'm sharing the my hosting experience, and I'm meeting with hosts. So it's such a different. I would think. I mean, when you get so big, you're so removed from that front line, and seeing what we're seeing in the niche space, on all of our niches, and the communities and the relationships that we're building within them, versus just throwing dollars at it.
Well, and that's what I was kind of getting at too. Like, it's great. I don't want to take anything away from the support in that space, but does it have the effect of what they're going to want to do, right? Like I said earlier, the result is, does it bring people to your platform? Are people, again, that's great. You sponsored the chorus, you sponsored this part, you sponsored this, you sponsored that. What does the consumer think? What does the customer think? What does the LGBT, plus traveler think, right? Like in this space, and again, or do they care? Like at the end of the day, because, while I think their issue is they can't focus on one thing, right? Like we clearly see they don't want to focus on one set over the other. So how do you broadly do this? And can you broadly do this is the question, in which I think we're seeing in our space is it's a challenge. And again, if they can't do it, somebody else is.
That's right. Where we come in. Yeah. I mean, I think as a brand perception, I think they have a very positive image within the LGBTQ plus community. But then, it comes down to the individual hosts. I mean, Airbnb can be whatever, and be whatever their brand is going to be, but it comes down to the individual hosts. And I almost look at it. I remember this example when Starbucks shut down for a day. They were retraining all their employees because there was an episode. I believe it was
the coffee shop incident with the guys that they kicked out. Yeah, I remember that.
I believe it was two Black gentlemen, and so the takeaway on that is you can do whatever you want on the corporate level, and your message can be whatever, but it's the people on the front line that are making the difference, that are interacting with the guests. So on the short-term rental, it's us as hosts. And it's us giving great hospitality, no matter what Airbnb is saying. It's what are we doing on the ground with us actually connecting with guests. That's where the difference is made.
The interesting
And let's
thing,
be clear, and let me put this out there. We're not just picking on Airbnb, right? Like I'm
right?
talking about all platforms, right?
Absolutely.
Because while Airbnb is good in some spaces, there's other platforms that we don't know what they do, right? Like, we don't know. I mean, maybe they threw a flag up on something and they feel like, oh, okay, well, hey, this is what again, I just wanted, we're not picking on Airbnb.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure that question is broad and that
Well,
goes
actually,
across all platforms out there.
well, funny enough, I actually I met with Booking.com as well. And I remember them sharing with me that they used to have a pride flag. I mean, you could, as a host, could check it off if they, but they ended up removing that because everybody checked it. So, but as it kind of loses its effectiveness if it's on every single listing. But yes, it is something that applies to all the different OTA platforms. Yes.
All right.
Robert, I have a question for you. And if we're talking about Pride Month, and we're just talking about throwing a pride flag up, okay? But I want your input on what you think that first, every major marketing campaign, every firm in the world that has money has made an LGBTQ plus positive marketing campaign for this month. You can't, when you're watching the television, everything is pride. I want to know from you as a person in the community what your thoughts are on this. Do you think it is authentic, or do you think it is just trying to capture the Pride Month and this kind of goes back to that niche compared to, or in the niche market compared to, someone with actually boots on the ground, is someone just kind of go ahead and how are we going to gobble up this shares? And what are your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's yeah, I definitely have my personal feeling on this one. Marketers are looking at a segment just in travel that spend $220 billion a year on travel. So, it's a segment that they're going after. Now, we in the LGBTQ plus space, we'll call it rainbow washing, and that's when brands will put up a rainbow. I recently posted on LinkedIn. I have my Pride message up there on my LinkedIn profile, and I then put in the comments, okay, brands, so what happens on July 1st? Where's your support on July 1st? What are you doing then? And I've talked to other marketers, whether it be the months that are dedicated to others. And yeah, there's definitely a degree of rainbow washing. I mean, when is it actually authentic? When does it feel that way? I remember one that felt real for me was Lego. I mean, when Lego came out with their Pride toy kit, I posted that. I remember someone saying rainbow washing, but I didn't feel it. And that one just felt so genuine, especially a children's toy. I mean, a toy that I feel like it's like educational. I mean, in that instance, that for me felt real and authentic, and putting something good out in the world that people can actually interact with their hands, and the teaching and the learning that could go with that, versus everyone putting a flag on everything. I have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction when I see certain campaigns. They don't all seem real, and they don't seem genuine.
It's the same with Black History Month. It's the same with every one of these months you're talking about. Every marketing, the marketers are psychologists. That's their job, and and how do you go? It's interesting. It's interesting to me, and I'm curious to I appreciate your insight on it, because I felt from the outside looking in that it definitely doesn't seem legit. It definitely isn't necessary. There are certain ones that seem more authentic than not, and some just seem like what can we snag from this?
Yeah, and it's some of it feels that way. I mean, there's rainbows everywhere right now, and it so I mean, I kind of question when I see it. I wonder, what is your corporate culture? What are you doing for your LGBTQ employees internally? Are you walking the walk? Are you providing healthcare to your transgender employees and individuals. I mean, so yeah, I think we as individuals, no matter what our niches and what our month is, I think we're all looking at it like, okay, what's authentic, what's real, versus everybody jumping on the bandwagon, and what happens on July 1st.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure, because, for so long, communities, marginalized communities have been asking for, the support, and, it's cool. From someone on the outside looking in, I like when I see a company, hey, for this month, they changed their logo to a rainbow flag, whatever that logo is. Nike came out with a special edition, pre shoes that are like, I was like, those are dope. I'd even wear those. But if you went deeper, like, look, they went through they give you they have a little flag that you can actually take off, and all the different, I didn't know there were multiple flags. So they actually went down and broke down all the different flags that you could actually put whatever one represented you on the shoe. So like things like that you can tell thought went into it. You can tell It wasn't just, an ornamental gesture to kind of placate the masses and say, oh, well, look, we're socially responsible in this way, hey, we threw some dollars at it. I think you hit the nail on the head. What happens on July 1st, or for the rest of the year, right? Like, what do you do as a company? What is your culture like? What do your employees think? What do your customers think, right? Like, at the end of the day, because I think it was always enough to just say like, oh, well, we did this. Did you see what we did for this?
Are we just checking boxes?
Right.
Or are we actually doing things? And it kind of goes into, those that know Mateo and I, we're both on, different DEI subcommittees. So we're, Mateo's is a Verma co-chair for the, subcommittee of DEI. And so this, inclusiveness has been a forefront of what we've been doing or trying to talk about and promote in our space for a long time. And, conversations that we've had not on, LGBTQ plus, but just in general, is, are you as a company feeling like CEO in different like high level spots, but by just checking boxes, like we need to go ahead and get someone in here to have a more diverse management team, and and you see this across, you see it in sports, you see it in everything. Okay, we need to go ahead and have a person of color. We need to go ahead and go ahead and make sure that we have a woman. We need to go, these are all, unfortunately, these are check boxes. I'd venture to say in most circumstances, it's check boxes. And who are those companies? Who's actually, invested in making a more diverse culture for the employees, a more diverse culture for the, the travelers to stay? And obviously now we're back into just our space, but it's a fine line. It's a double-edged sword. You call it whatever you want. It's we're going to be talking about it for a long time, and we need to keep talking about it. And for a lot of people, this episode's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well,
and we're okay with that. We want it to be.
Because it boils down to the why, John. Like, at the end of the day, right, if it's a checkbox, then the results, there won't be change, right? Because it stops there. Or, it was hot in the moment, but when the next news cycle came up and something else came on, again, the conversation diverted, right? So like, that's where I think now with the visibility that, companies have more visibility now. Like, before, this was a matter of, oh, we have to do this because it's essential to our company, right? Like, hey, we need to be able to show on our sheets that we've, got this, like the checkbox thing. But now that's just not enough. We've seen incremental progress to the point where you're not going to you can't hire people, right? Like, you're not going to be able to keep guests. And, it goes back to kind of like what we were talking about, like the whole origin of like where cancel culture comes from, right? Like, at the end of the day, people did things because they were afraid of the backlash, right? And that was actually a tool that actually pushed progression forward, right? But what it didn't do on the other side of that, and why people are so pushing back against cancel culture now, is because I think cancel seems finite, right? Like cancel, you're done. You can't learn, you can't get better, you can't change. And that's the missing part of that conversation. But the reality is it was prevalent because it forced change, right? And it maybe not the right kind, maybe not the right way, but it did force something into that way because it forced people to do things that they were not open and willing to do prior. But they had to, whether it was the economic pressure, whether it was the pressure of their own HR and their own teams or whatever, or the internal pressure of what they had to do. And I think that's why we kind of get the kind of mess that we have right now, where there's pushback against things that have been forced on people without really knowing why, and then kind of doing the ornamental things with not following up and building progressive cultures that actually make sense to people and understand why these progressive cultures are important to our communities, to the companies, and to the people that they serve.
Interesting, here in the short-term rental space, I'll have hosts, property managers reach out and they'll ask, how can I be recognized as inclusive? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great question. And I also think, and I'll share some information on that, but I'll also hear from people that, and I try to convey it, that if you have family travelers, let's say you're in Kissimmee near Disney, you're probably going to have themed rooms, and you're going to, bedrooms, and you're probably going to have toys. And if you have business travelers, you're going to make sure that you have great Wi-Fi and a desk. So it's about hospitality and anticipating the guest needs. Mm-hmm. And so in the LGBTQ plus space, I'll have to ask, like, what can I do preemptive? How do I get that message out there that I have an inclusive, welcoming space? And of course, the first thing is join FabStayz. But then secondly, if
number one,
right. If you're not on, that's fine, because we want to share information. We want an inclusive, welcoming world. So we're going to, of course, we're going to share information. And one thing that an individual can do, just on your profile, where there's the information as you as a host, having your pronouns, that little piece is actually sending a message that you get it, that you're I don't want to say that you're progressive, but you understand that others might not fit into a specific gender. So that putting your pronouns out there is just kind of putting your guest, especially in the LGBT community, at ease and saying, okay, I can be myself. This person is being their self. I can be myself. Right. I find that that's a very big benefit in just putting that simple little thing on a profile. Of course, we can put LGBTQ plus welcoming. I mean, I have that on my profile, that I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I have seen where images of your listing, where one image is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a rainbow flag, but it's just an image that say all are welcome here, or you've probably seen some signage, but just, something, it could be general, but it's just saying, hey, this is an inclusive, welcoming space where you can be yourself. And we've all seen the different signs. I found that has been a benefit as well. And I have heard on the flip side, I have heard hosts, especially LGBTQ plus hosts, where they've put on their listing rainbow flags and they've put LGBTQ plus messages. And I have heard that their bookings weren't as good. So you want to make sure that you're appealing to a broad market, especially if you're on a broad platform. But with these niches allow you to go more specific. But putting the pronouns, maybe having one of those images, sharing a welcoming message or inclusive message, those seem to resonate quite well.
Great points. I want to we're getting towards the end of our podcast here, so I want to two quick things. I want you to definitely give us a wrap up here for us, but I did want to quickly ask you. You told us that you came into this space as a way to go ahead and be welcoming. Nothing went ahead and negatively impacted you. I need to go ahead and build this. This is the reason, because these negative things happened to me and happened to my friends. It's more of I want a more welcoming for both the traveler and the host, to make a more inclusive and easy to navigate this business. Did you have anything, negative at all happen to you? Like, because you are out as pioneering this FabStayz in this niche market?
Yeah. I mean, sure. We all know social media, and we all know the trolls and how people can hide behind their keyboards and things that we'll post on social media. I mean, I'm active in short-term rental groups on Facebook, for instance. I'm not always met with open arms. I mean,
Mhm.
there are people that will comment and they've not been positive, but in a whole, in general, it has been extremely positive. But there's always going to be,
Mhm.
there's someone out there that's hiding behind the keyboard and just doesn't get it,
Mhm.
and that's okay. I mean, I'm not looking to change every single person out there. I'm not looking to change anybody. We have a great message we want to share, and those allies. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
We are not a gay platform. Even though this message is coming from a white, gay, cis male, we are an LGBTQ plus platform, and it's important to all of us that our message is getting out there, that everyone in the LGBTQ community is welcome, along with our allies, because no movement moves forward without those allies.
Yeah. And
Well,
I think you bring up a good point, man. And one thing I want to bring up before we get out of here too is like ally is a verb, right? And so like to be an ally is a verb. It requires action. It's not just. It shouldn't be thought of as in an adjective. It's just in that space because you say you are. How do we, speaking specifically to our industry and our space, right? That isn't always the most progressive, but has good people that oftentimes, want to do better, oftentimes, want to ask questions, want to learn more. Some don't, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. That's their choice. But how do we encourage the hosts that may be behind the keyboard and just don't know, right? And just don't. Again, maybe they come from a place where this isn't the norm, and maybe they just haven't had exposure. Maybe they again or just come from a different experience, which we know. Like, how do we? And I know this is a broader question, but how do we do better in terms of addressing the needs of those travelers, and specifically these travelers in this space across our industry, and specifically to what we do in the short term aspect?
Well, it's a learning process for all of us, and it's first just having the will and the desire to want to learn. I mean, I'm learning. I've made mistakes. I may have mispronounced somebody actually,
Mhm.
and I have, I use the term. It was a couple years transgendered, and it's not. There's no ed. It's not like I remember I was schooled on that, and I learned. I mean, it's evolving. I mean, we see it in non-binary. So it's continuing to evolve. So it's wanting to expand our mind and to learn, to be open to that learning. I mean, even and I just used the point that us in the community are learning and it's evolving as well. So it's being open to that. And there's some great resources out there. And even in each community, there's typically a gay lesbian chamber of commerce. It's called the NGLCC, the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. There's branches in communities all over the world. So there's an opportunity to see what businesses and what resources are in your local community for the LGBTQ plus traveler. So when they're visiting your destination, there's some great resources that they could utilize in your area.
it's awesome.
No, that's awesome. Great. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Well, this has been the most fabulous episode ever. It is episode 10. It's been enlightening. We're super stoked to have you as a guest. Thank you so much, Robert. And I hope that our listeners check out your website, check out some of these resources that you've gone ahead and mentioned, and everyone that is listening, just open up your hearts and open up your minds, and let's make this. And we got this. Ally, great wording. Ally is a verb. We are allies of the LGBT community. plus community. We are allies of all of this, and we're super stoked to have you. Thank you so much, Robert.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
man,
wait.
thanks for
Lastly, I'm sorry, but I didn't want to say Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
In Wall Street Journal.
I know.
This weekend.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's big news, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And should your listeners have any questions, they want to reach out, please do. I mean, we're all in this together. We have one shot at this. We're in it together. So if I can help anyone or assist in any way, don't hesitate.
And same here. If we can help you or in the community in any way, shape or form, please let us know. We're here to help.
Fabulous.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.